Welcome, folks, to this week's edition of Tech Sales Advice. I am, of course, your host, Chris White. This is the LinkedIn Live show for pre-sales professionals, pre-sales leaders. And let me emphasize, this is a live, unless it says recorded earlier in the upper left-hand corner, this is a live conversation. And as such, by design, unscripted, unrehearsed, and unpredictable. Although hopefully not as unpredictable as the Oscars last night. that was particularly unique. Folks, I'm really excited for today's conversation. We're doing something a little bit different. We flipped the switch a little bit, and I've invited my good friend and industry colleague, Mr. Kerry Sokolsky. Kerry runs an organization called Presales Mastery. I've actually invited him to host or guest host today's show so that he can interview me. Now, the reason we're doing this is because I have violated one of my own rules around confusing the audience. Now, before we get there, Kerry, do you mind taking just a minute and introducing yourself, sir?
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. And thanks for having me. It's a pleasure as always. I think it's been almost a year since I first showed up on your LinkedIn Live. So this is nice to be on the other side of the fence. And 50 or so of these into it, it's kind of cool that I get to be the first guest host. So thanks for that. So I run an organization called Presales Mastery. We do one-on-one personalized demo coaching, where we actually coach on live or recorded demos that have been delivered to prospects, go super deep on making sure that sales engineers, solution consultants, whatever you want to call them these days, are delivering the best possible demos. And it's an interesting business. It complements what you're doing very well, obviously. It's not training per se, but I'm excited to be here and to chat a little bit more about getting the word out about exactly what it is that you're doing and making sure people are clear on that as well.
Well, thank you so much. Interestingly enough, Kerry's actually given me some coaching on one of my demos along the way. So he and I have had a chance to work together. Incidentally, Kerry, we have a friend, Sebastian from London, saying hello. Folks, we don't have eyes on you. We're never really sure how many folks are out there. So by all means, if you care to ask some questions, if you care to just say hello, please do so. We will say hello back to as many folks as we can. So Kerry, sort of the reason we got here, and I mentioned this a moment ago, is I feel like I have created some confusion in the market, or I've been told by a few folks that maybe there's a little bit confused about what it is that I'm doing in workshops and that sort of thing. And you know, one of my favorite sayings is a confused mind always says no. When we're giving our demonstrations, when we're pitching and presenting to customers, we want to make sure that we're not, explain but don't over explain, as I like to say, and make sure we're using terminology. Now, you have a term called the Familiarity Trap. Do you care to take a minute and explain your Familiarity Trap? By the way, we've got someone up in the Boston area. And we don't actually see a name, but my dad grew up in Boston, so I have a special place in my heart for Boston. Talk about this Familiarity Trap, Kerry.
Sure. I mean, most people probably know this as the curse of knowledge, but it's the idea that we have our own sort of both conscious and unconscious biases because we are so familiar with our product or our service or our company or the demo model we're in when we're in front of customers or clients or prospects that we inherently just assume that they will understand what we take for granted and that they're as familiar with our solution as we are. And that's almost never the case. And it's interesting when I give people this feedback, and it is ubiquitous. It doesn't matter how senior you've been, your role is, how long you've been in pre-sales. Everybody does this, whether they're new to the role or been around for a long time. But one of the things I actually tell people about it is pretend you're demoing to your grandmother, right? And how would she, react to you saying some of the jargonistic terms that you use, or, just diving right into the details without giving the proper context of whatever screen you're on or whatever you're working through in the demo at the time. And that's typically sort of the light bulb moment. It's like, oh yeah, my grandmother would look at me like I was speaking Greek. And apologies to all the Greek people who wouldn't have a problem with that. But that's really what it is. And the nice thing about sort of the reason that I see it a lot is because as a coach, I'm viewing this demo that I'm watching or coaching as the objective third party. I don't know about your product that you're demoing, and so neither do your prospects. And so I can look at it through the prospect's lens and call that out. And it is fairly common. And so it's something to think about for everyone, for sure.
So the mistake that I've made that sort of falls in line with that is I sort of assume that people sort of I've tried to be as loud as possible on LinkedIn, and I guess I sort of assume that people understand, the workshops that I'm running and what I'm doing. And frankly, I've had a lot of people ask me, Chris, what inspired you to write the book, and when did you launch DemoDoctor, and what's the difference between DemoDoctor and tech sales advisors? And frankly, I feel funny just standing up and talking about these things, without sort of an audience. So you've been kind enough to sort of play host. So can I sort of just give you the reins and give you the opportunity to sort of reverse the script and interview me?
Absolutely, and thanks for the honors. So let's jump right into it. And why don't we start where you just started off with, which is, you got into this business a couple of years ago, I think just right as COVID was starting, which was a fairly auspicious timing, and it's worked out obviously very well for you. But let's go back even before that. What did inspire you to write the book? Because obviously most people out there know you for the book. So what prompted that you sort of put pen to paper and get that out there?
Yeah, and some people have heard me say this, so at the risk of repeating myself, I'm going to go back to when I first got into pre-sales, which was 2005, and I had a 15-year consulting, enterprise architecture, IT consulting career, and I thought I was going to be brilliant when I got into this profession because I could move a mouse and talk at the same time. And I found out very quickly that there's a lot more to this profession than being good in front of an audience. And I suspect that there's a lot of folks who have either heard that or maybe listening to this now that can relate to that feeling. And look, Carrie, I'm the first to admit I made some mistakes early on. By the way, I can't help but say hello to some folks when they join in. We have a friend from South Africa, and thank you for chiming in. But look, I took some lumps and I made a fair number of mistakes, but I figured it out. And discovered that there was a pattern of behavior. And when I followed that pattern, it produced reliable results. Fast forward about 5 years into that part of my career, in 2010, I took over a team of and this was a smaller organization, pre and post sales consultants, discovered that they were making many of the same mistakes that I had made when I first entered the role. And don't get me wrong, they were highly skilled consultants, professionals, but there was a lot about being on the pre-sales side that they just didn't understand. And at the time, there wasn't a lot of training available. So I created the first version of my training literally in 2010 to help my team. And frankly, it went over so well, the CEO got wind of it. And he actually, for the next couple of years, in addition to, quote, my day job, I was giving training for other, groups, literally, we were based in Europe, actually, literally across the globe. And along the journey, I had a number of people say to me, Chris, you got to write a book. And I actually tried to write a book. Incidentally, Carrie, at one point, I became an account executive. And so I was the guy carrying the bag, as we like to say, right? I was the one relying on sales engineers to deliver demos for me and for my engagements, right? So I sort of learned that side of the equation as well, got into enablement and discovered that my passion really was training and coaching. And it's actually interesting. I was at a sales, I think it was Sales 2.0 conference in San Francisco in 2018. And I had tried to write a book a couple times, but as I sat in that conference, it occurred to me that everyone on stage had written a book and then built a business around it. And that's when I decided I have got to figure out a way to get all this stuff that's in my brain on paper. As it turns out, I found a coach, and I like to say he kicked me in the pants, and out came a book. true story. I hired him on April 22nd of 2019. The book was published as an Amazon new release bestseller on June 21st of 2019. So less than 2 months. So anyway, as most people have probably come to know, I long-winded story, but there's sort of the genesis behind the book.
And so was that the plan all along? Was it that the book was going to sort of spur your ability to sort of derive a training business out of that, and that was where you planned to go next?
Carrie, the truth is I had no idea what to expect. And it's so funny, when I published the book, as I mentioned, June 21st, 2019. First of all, Presales Collective didn't exist. I'm not even sure SE Nation existed. People didn't know me from Adam. And literally, based on my coach's guidance, I managed to assemble about 30 friends and family members and former colleagues in a small venue right here in Leesburg, Virginia. And I literally had a Facebook Live. How funny is that? I had probably 20 people on a Facebook Live, and I had this book launch event. And literally I lied in bed that night thinking to myself, is this the tree that just fell in the forest and nobody was around? I honestly didn't know what to expect. But here's what I knew. I knew that without a book, the chances of launching a business like this was really unlikely, or going to be really hard to do. And if I may just say one more thing, the satisfaction of taking all this stuff that had been in my brain and getting it on paper, honestly, if that's as far as it went, that alone would have been incredibly satisfying for me. The fact that I managed to take this stuff that was in my head, organize it, get it on paper, and publish it, if I did nothing else, that was a success. So I was very much at peace with it.
Nice. So you went in with lowered expectations, which is always a good thing. It's hard to be disappointed when you do that. But I guess if you didn't expect the book to be a success, has it been a surprise that it has been so successful? And I think it's pretty safe to say it has been a pretty resounding success. I don't have any metrics I can quote. Maybe you do, but has that been a surprise to you?
It's been I have to, again, be honest and say it's been an overwhelming surprise to me, and obviously a delightful surprise. I knew I had, or I potentially had something special when a group from Salesforce that runs their onboarding program for new hires. So that, in fact, a gentleman named Steve Bullington, he reached out to me. He runs the Scout, or is one of the folks that runs the Scout program, which is the onboarding program for Salesforce for sales engineers and I think customer success managers. He reached out to me and said, "Hey, found your book, loved it." And this is about 4 or 5 months after I'd written it. He said, "Loved the book. In fact," he said, "you wrote the book I've been wanting to write for a long time. You did me the favor of writing it. We want to make it part of our onboarding program." It was at that point, that was in December of 2019. It was at that point where I found myself thinking, maybe I'm onto something here. Like maybe I've done something notable.
Awesome. All right. So I do want to get on to sort of talking a little bit about the business, but I have one more question about the book. It's a huge process to write a book. I've noodled about potentially doing one myself and continuously get scared of the amount of effort that's involved. Did you learn anything unexpected in the process of writing the book or even afterwards?
I did, and I'm glad you asked. And if anybody's listening, either live or in the recording, if you've ever felt like maybe you have a book inside of you and you but it's either it feels like it's too much work, or the mechanics, like I had no idea how to actually publish something on Amazon. Like just that part was scary and complete unknown for me. And by the way, that's what, particularly for sales engineers, once you understand, it's like one of the easiest parts of the whole thing, right? What I learned is this, Carrie. The first thing is you've just got to get it on paper, right? Like get the thoughts out of your brain and onto paper in some format, whether that's PowerPoint slides, OneNote, whatever it is, right? That's the first thing. The second thing is I reread and modified the original writing of the book probably a dozen times between the time that I first put it all on print and then actually published it, right? So I think a lot of people worry about getting it perfect, right? So by the way, it's what we talk about with demos, right? We spend so much time trying to get the perfect demo. There's no such thing as a perfect demo. There's no such thing as the perfect book, right? Get it the 70 to 80% on paper, and between the time you first get all your thoughts out and the time it's actually published, you will have edited it and refined it at least 5 to 10 times. And even today, I can go in at any time and I'll make a change here. I still get people telling me you have a typo here or there or something. So I think that's the biggest lesson, is don't strive for perfection. And by the way, this is what I paid a lot of money for a coach. And he used to say, Chris, completion over perfection. And that's really what I learned. But by the way, Pam from Boston, Chris wrote the book we all thought we should have written. That's nice of you to say, Pam. I appreciate those words. So anyway, Carrie, so I think that's probably the biggest lesson for me is I think it's perfection that and our need to be perfect that stands in our way. And I'll just go on record saying anybody who cares to pick my brain on how to write a book, I'd be happy to share. Rick Jones from Cleveland. Rick, my wife is from Oak Harbor, Ohio, so she's a big Ohio State fan. Thanks for dialing in.
Awesome. Okay, so amazing learning on the book. It sounds like an amazing experience, and frankly, I'm going to take you up on your offer there. But let's transition a little bit into the business now. So, DemoDoctor was the first brand. It's sort of where you started from. What was the genesis of that business? So you finished writing the book and then immediately launched the business. How did that start? How did it come about?
I was thinking about this morning, actually, Carrie, as we were preparing for this. The story is so interesting because I actually had the idea for DemoDoctor before I wrote the book. And look, folks, I had been trying to get to this part of my career probably for, I don't know, a good 5, 6, 7 years, but before it all came to place. And one of the things that I did is, again, I was an absolute nobody. Like nobody knew me from Adam. And I managed to assemble about 35 people into a small venue space, again, right here in Leesburg, of former colleagues and people that I knew that were sort of in the space. Honestly, a couple of guys that I knew from the gym. And I gave a seminar. Somehow I invited 35 people to hear me give like a 3-hour seminar built around the 6 habits. Okay. I hadn't written the book yet. And in that moment, I was like, I got to have something to hand out. So I literally created business cards for that little event. And I thought, well, what am I going to call myself? And I thought, I don't know, DemoDoctor sounds kind of cool. So I literally came up with the idea of DemoDoctor probably 2 years before I wrote the book. As a side note, there was a gentleman from Red Hat who attended that. And he was like, actually, that was pretty good. I'm going to see if I can get you into Red Hat. So about a year later, I got a chance to speak to some Red Hat SE leaders, and they were impressed enough to invite me to speak at their kickoff 2 years in a row, actually. I hadn't written the book. I barely had a DemoDoctor website, right? And I was sort of doing this on the side. So again, being just fully transparent, DemoDoctor sort of, it was a name that was sort of, it sounded good. and I had to come up with something because I was trying to do something on the side. And then it became an online training sort of platform before I published the book. And then I published the book, and then I decided to go full time into the business in March of 2020. And at that time, DemoDoctor had been running, so I just said, well, I'm doing DemoDoctor now full time. So again, a bit of a circuitous answer to your question, but hopefully that provides a little bit of sort of insight into the background.
I think it's fascinating, the winding journey about where things start and where they end up is never where you expect them to. So you mentioned that the business started as sort of like an online training thing. I know, having worked with you and been friends with you for a while now, the majority of your business now, for the most part, is this sort of in-person delivery of workshops, or whether it's through Zoom or, live. Tell us a little bit about the workshops and how they sort of started.
Yeah, I'll be happy to. By the way, I want to just call out to Rick. He mentioned he just finished the book, and I appreciate that, Rick. I really appreciate your comments. I have to give a great deal. I have to give it a great deal of credit. Actually, it is interesting, Carrie. Even when I think about some of the threads you weave, there was a gentleman who attended that free seminar that I had done here locally before I had written the book, who fast forward to November 2019. So after I had published the book, I think he was the CRO at a company called Entail. And he said, hey, we're looking at, doing some skills development. I'd like to put you in touch with our SE leader. And I connected with the SE leader. They actually hired me to run my first workshop for their team of about 20. And interestingly, that was February of 2020. And by the way, I still had my day job. I literally had to take vacation days to fly out to Phoenix to run a one-day workshop for this group. And then about a month later, I decided to go full time, and then sort of the world, shut down, right? But when I started, it was 6 Habits workshops for teams of pre-sales engineers. That was the focus. And I, again, literally the first company to hire me to do that was Entail. And of course I have a place in my heart for them. And then after that, I did some work with, Cloudera and a few other organizations. And I slowly started to build the business in 2020, running workshops for pre-sales teams, and in spite of COVID. So that's sort of, I'll pause there because I don't want to make the mistake that I tell my, the folks that go through my training to do and over explain. But that's sort of the genesis of the workshops.
Awesome. All right. So let's dig into the workshops a little bit. So for people who aren't familiar with them, what does the workshop entail? What does it look like?
Yeah. So the foundation is the 6 Habits. And I don't know how many of our listeners are familiar with the 6 Habits. And at the risk of boring those who do, very quickly, habit 1 is to partner with our sales counterparts. So the first module, the first thing that we focus on is how do we effectively engage with sales, and how do we build a collaborative partnership. Habit 2 is to probe, and it's all around discovery. So we spend a couple hours talking about what is our role in discovery. How do we engage effectively in discovery? How do we collaborate effectively with sales in the context of discovery? We talk a lot about the fact that, discovery is not an event, right? Discovery is really a process, right? Habit number 3 is to prepare. One of the mistakes that we make is we do some discovery, but then the demo doesn't change, right? There's no indication in the demo that we've actually learned anything new. So but then the other mistake that we make is we spend too much time, right? We need 2 weeks to prepare for a demo. Well, we don't have 2 weeks, right? So how do we prepare for demos with effectiveness and efficiency in mind? And there are a number of very specific best practices we cover. Habit number 4 is to practice. And arguably this is the easiest of the 6 habits in theory, sometimes the most difficult in practice. Yes, pun intended. So we talk about what are the best practices, when should we practice, and what should we practice, and how do we do so with our sales counterparts. Habit number 5 is to perform. And this is the customer facing demonstration best practices. And arguably you could build an entire workshop just around that. In fact, there's a question from Steve Tuck, and Steve, I'll touch on this briefly. The question is, can you give us a sense for how the 6 habits builds on great demo and how it differs, which is a really good question. I appreciate that, Steve. And the answer is arguably habit number 5 is aligns pretty closely based on my understanding of great demo. A lot of the things that we talk about is that it's the customer facing skills. How do we engage effectively? How do we present the solution in a relevant, meaningful way, etc. Whereas I think we tend to focus a little in the workshops, we go a little bit broader. Incidentally, many of my clients have had both great demo and or demo to win training, which is highly valuable. And then they bring us to do the 6 habits, which tends to be a little bit sort of broader and more encompassing. Anyway, so Steve, I hope that at least sort of whets that appetite a little bit. Of course, I'd be happy to talk offline. And then habit number 6 is to perfect, and this is the habit of constant and continuous improvement. And it's this idea of the debriefing with sales counterparts, and how do we make every demo, every meeting, every opportunity an opportunity to learn. So to answer your question, Carrie, the workshops are really structured around the 6 habits, but we go deeper in each of the 6 habits for starters. And we do, particularly online, I've done most everything through Zoom the past couple of years. We do small breakout rooms. We do exercises. Those are some of the things we do. Again, I'll come up for air. Does that answer that question, Carrie?
Yeah, that does very well. I want to elaborate a little bit on some of the other stuff. So, the focus topic of this particular session, aside from getting some clarity in terms of what you do, was relieving confusion. And part of that is making sure that you're absolutely clear in your communication. So I know you've got an affiliation with Aslan Training and Development. I know they talk a lot about sort of clear communication and sort of communication techniques, and how that can be sort of layered into how we work with our prospects. Can you talk a little bit about your affiliation with them and how you incorporate that into your workshops?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So when I was running, in fact, my last 2 jobs before I launched into the business full time, was in enablement, sales enablement. And in fact, I was working with a high-tech sales or high-tech software company in New York City. And ironically, I sort of reconnected with an old high school friend who had just taken over running marketing for this sales training company called Aslan Training and Development. And so when he and I realized that, wow, we're really in the same space, he invited me down to a workshop in Miami just to audit the Aslan training program. And he said, Chris, it's different than anything more than likely you've ever seen. And their program is based on this philosophy they call other-centered selling. And the best way to understand other-centered selling is it's the opposite of self-centered selling. As a sales enablement professional, I was simply blown away by the Aslan material, the Aslan approach, the concepts, and they were so fundamentally sound, yet easily implementable and tangibly implementable, something that I'd never seen quite to that extent. And so not only did I become an instant fan, I hired them. I hired them to come and do training for the organization that I was working for. And then when I launched the business, they reached out to me and they said, well, now that you've got your business, we have in essence, what they call an ACR, but really it's an Aslan certified instructor program where you can incorporate some of our, training in with you. This was such a perfect fit for me because some of my clients were asking me, could the AEs attend training with the SEs? So not only are the workshops now focused on the 6 habits and how do we collaborate together, sort of through the full life cycle of a typical sale, but now we're all, they're all getting exposure to this foundational approach of how do I engage with customers in a truly other-centered way, in a truly customer-centric way. And it has completely changed the game. Frankly, it's completely changed the game for me and the way I engage with my customers, and the feedback that I've gotten from customers is completely changed the game for them. So anyway, again, probably a bit of a long-winded response, but hopefully that touches on the question.
No, that's great. So let's roll back a little bit and explain to me why customers come to you or prospects come to you in the first place. What problems are they trying to solve that you're obviously able to help them with? And then I guess the converse of that is coming out of the 6 Habits workshop or your offerings, what are the typical sort of benefits or changes that your clients are realizing in their teams?
Yeah. And by the way, I'm glad you asked that, because Bill Balnave, hey Bill, it's good to see your name. He asked that question a few minutes ago, and I've been waiting for a good opportunity to bring that one to the surface. So I'll touch on both of those. I think the questions are, first of all, why do they reach out to me to begin with, and then what are some of the results that they're seeing? So the first answer is, and it's interesting. I hear these 2 words a lot, and that is soft skills. Chris, we need our sales engineers, our engineers. They're fantastic from a technical perspective. They understand the technology. They're experts in the field, but we lack some of the quote soft skills. Now, I'll admit I am not a huge fan of that term. I don't think they're soft at all. I actually think they're absolutely critical, and they're in many cases the most difficult skills. And to me, it's more of a mindset shift as well as developing skills than anything else. I think they're people skills. I think they're sales skills, right? If to me, the 3-legged stool is technical skills, people skills, and sales skills, right? By the way, it was that third that I lacked when I got into this role, right? And let's be a little bit more specific. When customers ask questions in those critical moments in a demo, how do we respond, right? Engineers tend to be a little bit, binary, right? Like it's either black or white, which the reality is that there's some gray area there, right? How do we effectively engage and at times negotiate with our sales counterparts, right? How do we effectively engage in the context of discovery? So that's the area that they recognize, is that we are losing deals because we're saying the wrong things or we're doing the wrong things, and we don't have to. And oftentimes engineers, particularly, those who are, come more from a consulting background, a technical background, maybe a super user, they're a customer, right? We just don't understand. We feel like there's certain things that we have to say and have to do when in fact we don't. So that's the first response. Let me pause there. Did that answer the question, Carrie? And does that resonate with you?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think there's clear set, like you mentioned, there's sales skills and communication skills and technical skills, and technical is usually the easiest to backfill. That's normally something that organizations can do pretty standard. There's obviously knowing your space that you're in the industry, that tends to be also something that the organization can do very well. But to your point, the communication and the sales skills are harder to come by when you've spent your entire career up to that point not in a customer facing from a sales perspective. I do a lot of deprogramming of my clients who've gone into pre-sales from services, let's say. They're of the training mindset, or the, I hate to say this, but the let's be overly honest, right? You never want to lie, but you don't have to tell the full truth all the time when we're in sales and we're demoing, right?
Well, and you know how I like to refer to that, right? Thou shalt not voluntarily confess thy sins, right?
Absolutely.
Thou shalt not voluntarily offer cautionary advice where cautionary advice is not necessary, right? And let's stick with this notion of other-centered selling, right? Not only is it detrimental to the sale, but it's detrimental to the customer, right? It's detrimental to their ability to make the best decision, right? By introducing these things that really they don't need to worry about that right now, right? That's a very good example of the type of skills and things that we talk about, and the reason that people reach out, right? At the end of the day, why do people? And part of it is trust. Part of it is I need to have greater trust in my team to say the right things, engage effectively with their sales counterparts, engage effectively with customers, right? So that's a lot of what we work on. That's a lot of what we focus on.
Okay. And then the other part of that question, and to Bill's point as well, what are the results that you're seeing? I'm assuming it's pretty related to what you just mentioned, but anything specific you want to elaborate on that front?
There are some specific things. The first, and it's actually an interesting segue into why tech sales advice. So again, I wrote the book. DemoDoctor had, the irony is that DemoDoctor actually has been around longer than the book has, right? And then when I wrote the book, it was like, well, DemoDoctor's a business. In 2010, I'm sorry, in 2020, I got my first request to have AEs attend the workshop with SEs. But then in 2021, it became obvious that this was now the trend. And the majority of my clients were asking that AEs attend the training with SEs. And I found myself thinking, if I'm an AE and I'm invited to go to a training program and the individual or the organization is called DemoDoctor, I'm probably not too excited about this training program. And so it was then that I decided I need a business name. I need a brand that's more representative of the workshops that we run, because they go much broader than just the demo. And I need a brand that sales professionals, right, the AEs that we work with, won't sort of resist or sort of put a question mark after. And Tech Sales Advisors was born because that just felt like the right fit. Now, why do I bring that up, and why is this an important part of the answer to your question? Is that the first word that comes to mind is empathy. One of the immediate results that the clients that I'm working with are seeing when their teams go through our workshops is AEs and SEs have greater empathy for one another. Why is that important? Because we have a tendency to dig in. We have a tendency to have friction through the funnel. And when we have friction internally in the funnel, that slows everything down. By creating more empathy, we work more efficiently and more effectively. And not only do things happen with greater speed, but the customer experience, the buyer experience is that much higher, right? And for any SEs that are out there, I want you to imagine you're working with an AE who has greater appreciation for the value of your time, has greater appreciation for how much work it is to do certain things. Likewise, for any AEs out there, imagine that you have SEs who appreciate the amount of pressure that you're under, and appreciate how difficult it is just to get the meeting, right? Much less present a solution in a way that's engaged or appealing to the customer and inspires them to want to take action, right? So the first thing that comes to mind, Carrie, is people are just developing greater empathy, and as a result, there's trust goes up, communication and collaboration increases, And as a result, they're closing more deals there, and things are moving faster. I mean, it's honestly, it's tangible and palpable. That's the first thing that comes to mind. There's two other things that I'm inspired to share. The second is discovery. I can't tell you how many SEs have come back to me after going through the program. They're like, my AEs are literally saying, what happened to you? You are, I mean, I love it, but you're approaching our customers in a completely new way. You just show up and throw up. And now you're focusing on them and what they're trying to do. You're making my job that much easier. And then the only other thing that I'll mention, just demos. You know, one of my favorite sayings, the MVD, the minimum viable demo. Less is more. And SEs are coming and saying, Chris, I used to stay up till all hours of the night preparing as much as I could. And now instead of focusing on quantity, I'm focusing on quality. I'm focusing on what are the one or two things that they need to see, focused on outcomes, focused on value, right? And so I'm doing less, yet having better results. So those are a few things that come to mind, Carrie.
Yeah, those are brilliant. And in a time and place when we have less and less time in pre-sales to get things done, that's gold, right? I think one other thing that I've noticed, I mean, I've sat through one of your workshops before, is what I love about the partnering, and that's why I think your new branding is spot on, is that empathy, absolutely, you need to understand what your counterpart is doing. But I think there's also the appreciation that the act of partnering enhances success for both pre-sales and sales. And everybody's going to be more successful when we're partnering effectively, rather than pre-sales being used as a utility that's pulled off the shelf as needed and thrown back on afterwards. And so I think that's a massive gain that I can see your clients absolutely realizing.
Exactly. By the way, Sebastian says, I like to say, we earn the right to demo after discovery call. It's really well said, Sebastian, right? We earn the right. By the way, not only do we earn the right to demo, we earn the right to ask certain questions, right? We earn the right to, present our solutions. I think if we take, and by the way, that's a very other-centered approach, right? We need to earn the right. So really appreciate that comment.
Awesome. So I'm going to throw a tricky one at you here. And, one thing I hear a lot from anybody in sales that's gone through a sales kickoff or sales training is one-time sales trainings. You get excited. It's awesome. Come out of it. You try things out for a week, and then you regress back into your sort of usual ways and habits. So what, if anything, are you doing to sort of augment the retention of the learning that your clients are getting from your workshops?
Yeah. No, I'm really glad you asked that. And look, I'm the first to admit, we put a lot of emphasis into the workshop itself because, frankly, we want people to have some fun during the workshop. We want them to be entertaining. We want them to be engaging. We do breakout rooms. We have polls, right? We play video. We don't play video games, but we show video clips and all sorts of things. But to your point, if people leave the workshop all fired up and enthusiastic, but within a few weeks have forgotten everything, then we have failed as a training organization. So we really intend to work more long-term, and we have a number of clients who are working with us more long-term. What are the specific things that we're doing? This is not a plug for this organization, but I happen to work with an organization called QStream, and it's a training reinforcement platform that sort of operates like a drip marketing campaign. So after the group goes through the training, they're signed up for this QStream, but instead of marketing messages through email, they literally get questions in their inbox that refer back to the training program for a period of 3 to 5 months, depending on how that program. By the way, management actually gets visibility into how the team is performing, how engaged are they, et cetera. So that's one of the things that we do that keeps it fresh in people's minds. Another thing that we do is we'll run quarterly sort of refresher workshops where we actually bring people back in and take some very specific opportunities or engagements and we put it on the table and we talk through. It's amazing when we have clients bring specific engagements to the table, so to speak, and we talk through some of the principles that we talked about in the workshop and apply them to the actual scenario. That's when lights tend to come on. So those are two ways in which we are doing that. And look, in full transparency, I launched this business officially in 2020, and really the 2021, was we did far more business in 2021 than we did. And I'm happy to say that we have quite a few repeat customers in 2022. So we are still learning with our customers how best to keep the momentum going. Interestingly enough, we have some clients who are asking us now for some demo coaching. So, we might actually, do some, and obviously we'll be talking to you about some demo coaching. So those are the couple things. There's one other thing that I'll mention, and this is something that I've learned about not only training, but really about honestly, even when we can give a demo, the use of what we call word pictures, right? Or things that are sticky. One of the ones that I use is the MVD, right? People familiar with the MVP, the minimum viable product. I like to refer to the MVD, the minimum viable demo. It's sticky. People remember it. One of the things that I've become pretty well known for is the shovel analogy, right? He or she who buys a shovel doesn't want a shovel, they want a hole. But they don't want a hole, they want a fence or a tree. But they don't want a fence or a tree, they want privacy or shade. Yet we show up and want to talk about the shiny shovel, right? That's something that tends to be sticky. I can't tell you how many people have come back to me after the fact. And they said, we were in a meeting, and the one thing that somebody said is, are we talking about the shovel, or are we talking about what they're actually trying to accomplish, right? So the more we can make things sticky, and we've got a number of terms like drop the rope. Anybody who's been through my program knows what drop the rope is. It's a very specific thing. That also makes it sticky.
Nice. Very cool. So we've talked a lot about sort of the different branding, your journey. I'll ask one more sort of last quick question on that front. Is DemoDoctor going away? Is that sort of been sunsetted now, or is it the tech sales advisors exclusively, or what's going on there?
I'm really glad you asked. DemoDoctor is not going to go away. Is not going away. And the idea for DemoDoctor is online training for individuals and or teams. It's still going to be focused on the 6 habits, with certainly with an emphasis on nailing the demo. In fact, I'm working on sort of a new sort of motto for DemoDoctor, but I think it's going to be something like nail the demo, land the job, close the deal. And so we're going to be offering an online training program specifically designed for people who are interviewing for jobs, and they've been asked to do a demo as part of the job interview process. It's going to be a sort of a shrunk down version of the 6 habits to help them prepare for the demo, as part of the job, application process. And then in addition to that, we're gonna start creating some smaller, consumable online training specific for discovery, specific for demo design, specific for demo delivery. So that's sort of what's coming for DemoDoctor. And then Tech Sales Advisors is going to be continuing to do the training workshops, for SEs and for AEs and SEs together. Actually, I have one client that hired me just to do training for the AEs, and that was mostly the Aslan, training. So that's the scope there. But then we're also going to be offering consulting services. So whether that's helping organizations sort of assess the demo itself, help stand up some process. We're going to talk here in a minute about some work that we've been doing with the vendors in the space and the buyer's guide. So we'll be offering some services around that as well.
Awesome. Sounds like a lot.
It's a lot.
You've got your plate full. Very cool. Well, listen, Chris, this was amazing. I hopefully everyone on this call has got a little bit more clarity in terms of sort of what prompted your journey and what you're actually delivering and reasons to engage with you and with tech sales advisors, because you're obviously offering a lot of uplift across a lot of different aspects of pre-sales. So congrats on that.
Well, thank you, Carrie. And I appreciate, first of all, I appreciate you taking the time to do this and ask me these questions. For me to have this conversation alone would be very difficult for me. For those of you who have listened and stuck around, I hope this was insightful and meaningful to you. If nothing else, you've sort of, heard a little bit more about my journey and sort of, the different sort of twists and turns that I took to get here. And as Carrie said, hopefully I've created a little bit more clarity around the 6 habits and DemoDoctor and tech sales advisors. Carrie, before you run, normally I do a lightning round at the end of this, but before you run, I would love to take the reins back and just ask you a few questions and invite you to share a little bit. As you well know, you and I have been working on a project for about almost 6 months now. And it's the buyer's guide, the pre-sales buyer's guide. We have interviewed almost 20 vendors in the space. We're going to be releasing here in a month. Do you want to talk a little bit about the buyer's guide and what people can expect in terms of the information that'll be published?
Absolutely. And first off, thank you. It was a pleasure doing this. It's a lot less pressure being on this side of the fence. I'm not
now you know why I like to host this show.
I was just going to say, I'm not denigrating your hosting abilities or the fact that you're not doing an amazing job, but it certainly is less pressure for sure not to have to talk so much. So that was a lot of fun. So yeah, the pre-sales buyer's guide, Chris, as Chris mentioned, we've been working on this for almost 6 months. I think we started talking about this in August. Was really in response to what has been an absolute explosion over the last 2 years in terms of investment in new pre-sales solutions to solve the common problems that we in pre-sales have had and pre-sales leadership's had for a long time, but just has mostly been ignored. Most sales tech is really focused sort of top of funnel and very bottom of funnel, but where we live in pre-sales in the middle of funnel has sort of been neglected for a long time. And there is a slew of new vendors that have popped up over the last couple of years, and there's an amazing amount of investment going into these organizations, which I think is a testament to the amount of value that they can provide. And Chris and I started chatting back in August about the fact that there seemed to be 2 problems around this space. One was, going along with the themes of this particular LinkedIn Live, there was a lack of clarity in terms of what everyone did. There was, I would say that, some of the vendors had done a great job of spending lots of marketing dollars on getting their brands out and themselves well known, but there wasn't necessarily a sense of clarity in the market in terms of exactly what problems they were solving, what use cases they were addressing, and how they could help organizations. The other was just an awareness gap. When you start out in a new space, when the space itself is sort of non-existent, there's a lot of education that needs to be done, but a lot of these vendors people just didn't know about. Obviously, some did have some good marketing dollars and were able to sort of get their name out there. A lot of them didn't, though. They were focused more on the product and getting the solution right before they went to market. And so there was a general lack of awareness in the market in terms of who was out there, and then a lack of clarity in terms of what each of them could do. And so Chris and I got together and decided that this was something we wanted to tackle together. We realized it was way too much work for either of us to do on our own. I think, in hindsight, we'd probably argue it's probably too much work for 2 of us to do even together. However, we put our heads down and have been going gangbusters for the last 6 months at this. And we invited a couple dozen vendors to participate, and 21 of the 20 vendors agreed to participate in this study. And unlike a Gartner Market Scope or Magic Quadrant, we're not evaluating the vendors in a way that we're actually grading them by any stretch of the imagination. We're not going to plot them on some chart to say which ones are leaders or laggards. Really, the idea here is we're trying to accomplish 2 things. One is we're trying to help the vendors get market awareness more broadly than they might otherwise be able to do. And then we're on the converse side of that, we're trying to help pre-sales leaders make more informed buying decisions. Most of us, and I talk a lot about this when I'm coaching, I know Chris, you do when you're training, it's part of the familiarity trap, is that most prospects we talk to are not sophisticated buyers. Most people do not buy software for a living. They don't know how to do it. And even in pre-sales, we never even hold budget. So even if we want to buy stuff, we're still beholden on some other organization, whether it's sales or enablement or somebody else even to pay for it. And so we need all the help we can get in really sort of streamlining that evaluation process. Who are the vendors that I should be talking to if I've got problem X, Y, and Z? And that's really what we're trying to solve, is helping you, the pre-sales leadership and the buyers, understand what are the solutions that are out there that can help you. And then what are the things that you should be doing in that evaluation? What are the questions you should be asking to make sure you're getting the right solution? Because this space is so new, you don't necessarily know to ask the questions to uncover the warts or the particular gaps that might be out there in these solutions that are still very young in a lot of cases. There are some that have been around for a while, but most of them are fairly new. And so we wanted to help pre-sales leaders make better buying decisions. And that was really the other side of the fence there.
Yeah. And if I may, Carrie, it's going to help pre-sales leaders even make the decision about where they should invest to begin with, much less what companies or what vendors to consider, right? Because we can invest in demo automation, we can invest in response management, we can invest in what we call pre-sales oversight and management, or individual contributor sort of automation, and what we're calling pre-sales opportunity management, right? So the first question to consider is, which of these buckets should I focus on or target, right? And then once I'm in that area, what are the vendors and what are the questions I should be asking, that sort of thing. So I'm excited for this. It's been a lot of work. And Carrie, any final thoughts just in terms of like the actual the consumption and how people can actually get a little bit more information?
Yeah, so we'll be publishing in April. It's going to be coming out next month. We're really excited about it. I think the vendors are really excited about it. This is not a paid publication. This will all be free to anybody that wants access to the information. We wanted it to be as useful as possible to as wide an audience as possible. So if you would like more information, if you'd like to be notified when the report is released, go to our website. It's presalesbuyersguide.com. presalesbuyersguide.com. At the very bottom of the page, there's a sign up for our newsletter. If you click on that, two things will happen. One is you will get notified when we do release the report. The second is you'll be able to watch a teaser that Chris and I did a couple of weeks ago to give you a better idea of what's going to be included in the report, the types of problems we're looking to help pre-sales organizations address, and any other questions you might have about it. So presalesbuyersguide.com, check it out.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Carrie. And Carrie, thanks again for signing up to interview me. I know I get a little bit crazy and I wave my hands, but in full transparency, look, folks, it's probably difficult for me to just talk about myself. That's why I run these, and I always have a guest because I'm far more interested in hearing from others. But Carrie, thank you. Any of you who hung around, thank you for tuning in. For those of you who may have happened to read my book, thank you for giving the book a chance, and any of you who may be customers, thank you for trusting in me and my organization. And I'm going to invite you all, if you care, to follow and see more of these. Follow #TechSalesAdvice. We run all of these LinkedIn Live. I'm trying to do this at least once a week. And I want to invite you to join me next week. I'm actually going to introduce a couple of new members of the Tech Sales Advice team and talk about sort of where we're headed with that. So again, Carrie, thank you so much. For those of you who are out there, thank you so much. Had a comment from Alvin. we look forward to sharing that with you, Alvin. And we had another comment from another gentleman, and a comment from Steve. Thank you, Steve. Really appreciate those words. Folks, again, thank you so much. Carrie, thank you. Folks, we'll see you all next time. Carrie, hang around just for a minute. You'll get your parting gift after we close. Thanks all. We'll see you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.